Let me start, Joseph, with you, because I thought it might be useful to kind of put this into perspective. We hear a lot, as I said, about employee ownership and shared capitalism. Just how far back does this go, and what do you see of some of the changing dynamics today, particularly in the context of technology companies?
Well, it goes very far back. You may not realize this, but after the American Revolution, the cod industry in the United States was similar to basically the microchip industry. It was sort of one of the major export industries in the United States, and the shipping had been destroyed by the British. And Alexander Hamilton, as Secretary of the Treasury, and Thomas Jefferson, as Secretary of State, were trying to figure out for George Washington what to do with the cod industry. You also have to know there's a national security side to this. The sailors in the cod ships would double as taking over the temporary navy when there was a national defense issue. So Jefferson was put by Washington in charge of a committee to figure out how to bring the cod industry back, important for the economy, for national security, for New England jobs and families. And they decided that they would provide a direct incentive to the cod industry, a stimulus. And the owners of the ships said, just pay it directly to the owner and investors of the ships. That'll be fine. But the New England fishermen, who had always had full profit sharing and many of them equity stakes in some of the ships, said no. We want it done the traditional way of shared capitalism was done in the cod industry, in the colonies, and then in the United States. And so Jefferson's committee recommended to the President and Congress that the incentive be shared 60% to the sailors and 40% to the owners and investors. Hamilton, who, as you know, fought with Jefferson about every economic policy, implemented this, supported it, and even praised it in his report on manufacturers to the U.S. Congress, and it remained for several decades a very important part of resuscitating the American cod industry, and subsequently training those sailors who defended the country in further attacks in the coming 20 or 30 years. So it starts way back. William Cooper Proctor in 1887, after leaving Princeton in 1883, implements a broad-based profit sharing, and a few years later, employee ownership in Procter & Gamble. And George Eastman, at the end of the 19th century, is probably the first high-tech fellow to implement something like broad-based stock options to keep his very important, highly trained employees with Kodak. So this is part of the economic history of shared capitalism that I'm writing. Hopefully by the time I'm 100, it will be done.